everybody, welcome to another Fatal Rose Creations tutorial, and today we are going to go over using Sims Ripper to rip your sim into a Blender scene, and I'm also going to go over some tips and tricks for making nice renders in Blender. So the first thing we're going to do is make our sim, which I have already done, and we're just going to save and put that sim on a random lot. Alright, once you have your sim on a lot, check one more time to make sure they look how you want, and we're literally just going to click exit, save, and exit. Alright, so the next thing we're going to want to do is go to modthesims.info, which I'll drop the link in the description, and you'll initially come to this screen and you'll hit download, and we're going to grab this one right here. Then just go to wherever it's saved, right click, extract, browse. I like to put mine in my documents folder, or maybe not, put it on my desktop. Cool. So once you've extracted it, it's installed, and now you just go to the file, and you should scroll all the way down, and you should see one that says application. Double tap that. Run anyway. I've never gotten a virus from it, but I also have Norton, so be safe out there, but it should be fine. So first thing you need to do is click select, and then you're just going to want to pick your last save. And so this is the one I just did. I did not remember the name of the sim. Crap. When you save your game, make sure you remember the name of your sim. I had to open Tray Importer because I completely forgot her name. But she should look pretty normal. You can use these to kind of rotate them around and make sure that she looks good. And then up here, we're going to click Clean DEA. And then we're going to change single mesh and textures to solid glass meshes and textures. I'm just going to put this to HQ. And then here's where you can change, like if you have a vampire sim, you can switch between human and vampire. And then you can switch between outfits, change how pregnant they are, blah, blah, blah. So those are really the only settings that you have to change. Changing the texture size doesn't make a whole lot of a difference, but I do most of my rendering for my own CC, and my own CC is in HQ texture size, so that's why I pick HQ. And then we just gotta wait for that to finish working. And then we just click DAE. Alright, and then you just save it wherever you want to. And if any time any of this stuff takes a long time, don't be stressed out. I literally have a brand new GPU in my computer and it still takes a long time, so it just happens. So once you have all that done, we're going to go into Blender. So for this, I'm using Blender 3.5. Pretty much everything applies essentially the same if you're using older versions. Honestly, I don't see why it's necessary to use older versions. Even if you have an older GPU, like I just upgraded this computer, but my old computer had a 1660 Ti, and it used brand new versions of Blender just fine. So, but of course, to each its own, use whatever Blender version you want. Pro tip, if you download from the website, you can only download one version of Blender, as it'll just replace the older version. But I always recommend for content creators, because a lot of times you need 2.70. You can download that one from the website, and there is a little bit of a workaround where it usually lets you download 2.79, but download the rest of them from the Microsoft Store if you have Windows, because then you can have multiple versions of Blender on your computer. I have 5 versions of Blender on mine, so it can be done. You just gotta download it from the Microsoft Store. But Alright, so the first way we're going to bring in our sim is if the scene is already here. So this is a scene that I just finished and you'll actually be able to download today if you would like. But you should open your scene and just go to File, Import, Collada, tap that, go to wherever you saved your sim, and they should pop in. And then you can just adjust if needed, and boom, your sim is in. Alright, so this is usually what pops up when you first open Blender, so you can delete that, File, Import Collada, bring her in, and then you can click File, Append, and go to wherever you downloaded your Blender scene. So here's my Blender scene. Then go to Object, and you're gonna want to bring in all of the stuff. Now, I don't personally like doing this way, but it is possible for you to do it that way. So if you would like to do it this way, then fine. You do lose like preset settings for the Blender scene if you append everything in. So that's why I like opening the scene first and then bringing the scene in, because as you can see, I've got settings already preset here and things here are already preset. So now bring our sim in. And so now we need to get her with her textures and posed. So first I'm just going to make sure she's on the platform. Now for textures. So over here is where you see everything that's listed in the scene. Depending on the scene creator, your rig might pop up in different places, so you just have to kind of look for it. If you do open a scene first, if you click on the box of wherever you want it to open, then it'll open in that specific place. So now we're going to click down the drop downs, and first we're going to bring in our textures. So if you don't already have double windows, you can right click here, click vertical split and drag this over, and it'll make a new window. But this already has one. So we're going to go over here, click this drop down and change to shade editor. And then I'm just going to bring that over. Then under rig, click the first name box, the one that doesn't say glass. Sometimes you'll have two, sometimes you'll have one. If you're doing mostly Maxis match, that's normally when you have one. Glass textures are going to be usually like hair and anything transparent and eyeshadow, stuff like that. So the first thing you want to do is turn down specular all the way to 0, because your sim can get a little shiny, and so I like to turn it down. You don't have to if you don't want to. Then we're going to go to specular, grab color, and drag it to specular. Now we're going to press Shift A, go to shader, and then mix shader. Then right in between here, drop the box. Then take this and drag it to the bottom, and take this alpha from base color and drag it to the top. Then we're going to press Shift A again, shader, and go to transparent BSDF. Then we're going to grab this little dot here and drag it to the middle one. Now we're going to do the same thing for our glass textures. So specular down, color to specular, Shift A, shader, mix shader, this down here, alpha to FAC, shader, or Shift A, shader, transparent BSDF, and then BSDF to the middle. And then for the glass texture one, we're going to want to go over here, click this red circle, drop down to viewport. So if you can't see it, apparently just open up viewport and change blend mode to alpha hashed. That's everything for shading. Okay, I'm gonna click pose, go up here, drop down to pose mode. Now press A, then press I, lock, rot, and scale. Now we go back over to our second panel and click the drop down and change it to non-linear animation. Now we need to drop this box down while it's still orange, right click, and click delete strips. Now we need poses. So one pose creator that I like to use is Rose Lipa, and so we're going to need a pose. So I'm just going to download this one, and we're also going to need Sims 4 Studio, which I'll leave the link in the description. And so from the main menu, you can just go to My Projects, Downloads, and click on that pose pack we just downloaded. And let's do this one. And so make sure the rig matches the kind of sim you're doing. So we're doing an adult female. So click export and then save wherever you would like. I like to be descriptive of what I'm saving it so I know what it is next time I need it. Save, and then you should see it pop up. We can minimize that, go back into Blender. So up at the top, we're going to click File, Append. We're going to go to where we saved that pose, and we're going to click it, and then click Action, and the name of the pose. Then up here, Add Action Strip, and the pose. Now, if you look right here, we can see that her hand is inside of her thigh, and we don't want that. So I'm going to show you how to fix poses. Now, most pose creators ask that you don't alter their poses, but usually that's meaning don't alter my pose and re-upload it. If you're altering the pose just to take a picture, then it should be fine. Obviously, if you're super unsure and you don't want to stress anybody out, you can contact the creator. So click pose over here, make sure you're in pose mode, and then I like to switch to this wheel or this wheel, and I'm gonna click on this bone right here. So all these little black circles on the body are different bones, and I'm gonna click until I get the right one. I want her forearm. You can see up here what you're trying to click. It's not giving me the bone I want. Okay, since I can't seem to get that bone, I'll just use the upper arm. And then over here, we're gonna click this one that to me looks like a boat with a bone, but obviously that's probably not what it is. We're gonna click Add Bone Constraint, and then Inverse Kinematics, and then right here we're gonna change chain length to 4, and then just gonna grab this and then hold shift and slightly move it forward. Alright, so now her hand is not inside of her leg. Now, if you want to save that, you have to press A, I, lock, and or location and rotation. That'll save it. If you do not do that, it'll just revert back to its original place. Now, if you're one, if you would like to pose 2 Sims, you do the same steps. So you import the first one, you can do its maps and shading, then import the second one, do the shading. The important part is when you're doing your pose. So you can click on pose for your first sim, and then go to pose mode, A, I, lock, rot, and scale. Drop this down, delete the strip, and then File, Append, pick a pose. And the important thing about if you have multiple sims is before you go to the second sim, click here to unhighlight that bar. Then go to the second sim, go back to object mode, then go to the second sim, click on pose, go to pose mode, A, I, lock rod scale, drop down, and delete the strips. If you do not unclick and unhighlight that pose, you will delete the pose of the first sim. So it's important that you make sure that box isn't highlighted. Now, if you're wondering why the heck you can't see the textures and the colors of the scene, it's just because we're not in render mode, because sometimes it can make things take longer to load. So all you have to do is click this circle right here, viewport shading, and that's what it's going to look like when you're in render mode. So now the next thing we need to do is angle our camera. As we can see, we've got a camera right here, and we can click it. Now I usually, for my scenes, make it so that way the camera moves when I move it. If you get into a scene and this isn't already enabled, you can press N, click view, and then check this box that says camera to view. And then you can press N to make that side go away. So now we've got our camera where we want. If you're in your scene and you feel like you don't have enough lighting, Shift A. And there are different types of lights. So an area light is kind of like a singular directional light. I don't know if that's the way to say it. A point light is just a little ball that'll give it a little brightness to whatever it's close to. A spotlight looks like spotlight. And then a sunlight is a pretty big light. Usually you won't add sunlights. And then if you ever do add a light and want to change how bright it is, you just go over here to the light bulb and then change the power. Usually if I use area lights or point lights, I change the wattage to about somewhere between 40 and 70. But this scene already has the lighting set up and the picture looks good. So now you can render it in Eevee. Some scenes can't render in Eevee. Some scenes are made to render in cycles. Like as you can see, the platform here changes. I'll just show you both so you can kind of see the difference. So once you're ready, just at the top, hit render image. And rendering in Eevee is always going to be a lot faster. Then you can just click image, save as, and then save your picture wherever. And then with cycles, the settings already done, render image. So as you can see, it's taking a little longer to render the cycles image, and the scene, the picture looks a little different. But either way, the results are both nice. Again, image, save as. So just kind of depends on the scene and your computer whether or not you render in cycles or if you render in Eevee. Now, one thing that can help your render process is if you go to Edit, Preferences, and then System, and you can change it depending on your graphics card. You can change your Blender to render using your graphics card, and If you go on the Blender website, it'll tell you which one's best to use, but if you have a nice NVIDIA, I recommend using optics. And just check both these boxes. And as you can see, if I uncheck them and change it to none, click render, render image, it now says it's going to take 6 minutes to render, whereas when I had it rendering on my GPU, it took like 30 seconds. So it does make a difference to render using your It does make a difference to render using your GPU if you have a nice one and you can use it. And this bottom one is your CPU, your processor. Another setting that you can change is when you're in cycles, you can change it from it is default at CPU. You can change it from CPU to GPU, and then it'll render faster. Lastly, another thing you can do, if you look under sampling and where it says render, you can change the max samples to a lower number. As you can see, I have it set as 1,000. My GPU can render things at like 5,000, but some people's can't. So if you're having trouble or your renders are taking just way too long, try changing the max samples down to a lower number. So while we're here, another thing that I've been asked to go over is how to make a simple scene. So I'm going to show you really quick a couple things you can do to make a nice little Blender scene. So if you just want a colorful background, you always start with this cube, and I'm just going to bring in my sim real quick for sizing. You always get this simple cube, so you can grab it, press S, scale it up, then press tab, click this box here, click on the front, press X, and then faces, and you've got a little area. And then if you wanted to change the color of this, you could go over here, click this red circle, and a couple things I like using is the glossy shader, and then if you change this to sharp, then you kind of get a mirrored background when you're in cycles. So I like to do that. And then sometimes I like to use the glass shader if I want to make the color of the world visible. So like I can have this set as glass, and then this is to change the color of the world if I wanted to make it like teal. And so that gives kind of a cool effect. Another thing you can do is go to Edit, Preferences, and then Add-ons, and search Image. If you can spell image, which apparently I cannot, and click this box, Import Images as Plain. We're just gonna delete this, change the world color back to something. Now that we've checked that box, we can press Shift A, Image, Image as Planes, and I don't even know if I have a good picture. Let's see. Google. Back to Blender. Refresh. Okay, so as you can see, my picture that I just downloaded is in the world. You can press S to scale it, and then it's kind of like a backdrop. And then quickly, if you would like to make a room, we're going to bring our cube back by pressing Shift A, S to scale it, Tab, click that front face, X, face. Try and get it lined up with her feet. Then I'm going to use that to kind of size it. Now I want my walls to be separate, so I'm just gonna, I press Tab, hold Shift, and click on these walls, then press P, selection, and then I'm gonna click on the floor and press P, selection. So now that's all separate. You can get different materials from lots of places. One place that's really cool is Blender Kit, because you can install it as an add-on and then it's in your Blender. So I can just go here to material and type floor. And so I'm just going to rename this floor, walls, ceiling, and I can take that, drop it right there, and if it looks funny, you can press Tab, A, not A, or yes, A, and then we can hit subdivide, then up here, unwrap. And if you really want to get crazy, we can go here, go to UV editor, click this so that what happens over here matches over here, and then we're just going to press S and make it bigger. Now we've got a better looking floor texture. Then we can type wall. You can also create the textures. If you go here, there's also a super in-depth node system, but that would be a whole tutorial in itself. So again, we can press Tab, subdivide, 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 and then over here, S, scale it. You can press G to move it, and then we can look up ceiling and give it a ceiling texture. Obviously this room looks crazy, but it's fine. Tab A, subdivide, 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 and then over here we can scale it. So clearly the patterns don't go together well, but you get the point. Now if we wanted to bring in some Sims objects, we can go into Sims 4 Studio, create 3D mesh, and then click object. And the way you bring objects in is you just find something. We'll just go with this. Scene's gonna look terrible, but it's fine. Go to next, and you have to save a package file, but we don't need this package file, so you don't have to get critical about what you name it. I usually just name it whatever it is. First, you're gonna go to mesh, and where it says LOD 0, just export. And then go to texture and export. If it has multiple textures, make sure you grab all of them. Then we can go back into Blender, click File, Append, and we're gonna go to where we saved the sofa, double click the name, go to Object, and bring in all of the studio meshes. Then we're gonna right click and delete hierarchy on bone shape. Same thing for the new rig. And then we don't need the thing that goes on the bottom, so we can delete that as well. And then we can delete those as well. So now click on the mesh, go to shading, then down here where it says diffuse, click X, and then new, then press Shift A, texture, image texture, drag color to base color, and it should turn black. Then click open and go to wherever you saved the texture and bring the texture in. Now you want to be mindful when you're making scenes and stuff like this, that you want to check with creators' TOUs. A lot of object creators don't allow their objects to be used in Blender scenes, but some of them do. So if you have a creator and you want to use their stuff, then just reach out to them. If I go on my Patreon, what is the name of that creator? This creator here, I know if you reach out to her, she at least did for me. I contacted her and she allowed for me to use her stuff in Blender scenes. So a lot of creators are really nice, and if you just reach out to them, then a lot of creators are really nice. So if you just reach out to them, ask permission. Don't be the guy that puts people's stuff in Blender scenes when they don't like it. But yeah, so that's how you take a sim from game, get it into Blender, render it, make a little Blender scene. Yeah, so thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you guys in the next one.